Hi, everyone. Welcome. We will get started in a minute. We're just going to wait for more folks to come in, and then we'll get started soon. And thank you for joining us. This is really exciting, and I hope you all enjoy it. Hi, everyone. For those of you just coming in, we'll get started in a second. We're just going to give a little bit more time for the folks who are still coming in. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We are going to give it a few more minutes before we get started. And yeah, we'll get started soon.
Would love to hear where folks are joining us from. If you want to just drop your name and where you're joining from in the chat, that would be great. Welcome, everyone.
I see folks joining us from Tucson. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Baltimore, that's awesome. Yeah, so if you folks want to continue to put where you're coming from in the chat, that would be super awesome. Okay, Phoenix, Mesa. And then we'll give it about 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. I see more people from Phoenix. Awesome. Nice to have people from Phoenix here as well. All right, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm seeing folks from everywhere here, so that's super awesome. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Methane Power Plant Reality, exploring its impacts on human health. And we are so glad to have you all here. And let's get started. So before we continue, we would like to go over an agenda. So first, we're going to do introductions. So hi, my name is Alondra Morales. I am from Phoenix, Arizona, and I am the environmental justice organizer with Poder Latinx. If you all can continue dropping where you're coming from into the chat as we continue this first part of the presentation, that would be awesome. We're going to go over why we are here today. Then methane power plants. Next, SRP peaker plants. Then health impacts, a clean energy future. And then lastly, how you can get involved. Oh, just kidding. Lastly is the Q&A. So we will have a chance for all your questions at the end. But if you have any questions before the end, feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. So meeting agreements. The first meeting agreement is to participate with intention. The second one is to respect others with differing backgrounds and ideas. And then the third agreement is that panelists will provide accurate information and leave space for questions. So why are we here today? So today we're here to define peaker plants and how they are used, learn about the connections between methane gas, lung health, and air quality, meet professionals who work in transmission planning, renewable energy, and energy efficiency, learn about how the electric grid works, learn about how new clean energy technologies that can support the grid reliably, and lastly, how you can get involved. Sweet, so let's meet our panelists. So our first panelist is Vivian Juan. She is an Arizona healthcare professional for climate action. Then we have Yara Marin, who is the regional director from Interior West Vote Solar. And lastly, we have Kate Bowman, the regulatory director, Interior West from Vote Solar. And lastly, me, the moderator, Alondra Morales Sanchez, the environmental justice organizer with Poder Latinx. All right, so methane gas powered plants, peaker plants. So these are the peaker plants that we are speaking of today have to do with the Salt River Project. Those are Arizona's second largest electric utility. So SRP provides services to more than 2 million customers in the Phoenix metro area. They decide the energy rates, any extra fees on your electricity bill, and how easy it is for you to go solar. They are a public utility and is overseen by a board of directors who must be landowners and are elected exclusively by landowners in a portion of SRP service territory. So every 2 years, the SRP holds board and council elections, and the SRP runs their own elections too. So even if a person regularly receives a ballot for other elections, whether it is city, state, federal, they still need to request a separate ballot for this election. So SRP, or wholly owned by SRP and located in Glendale, Arizona, we have the Agua Fria Generating Station, which is home to 3 conventional steam generation units and 3 combustion turbine generators. We also have the Kyrene power plant, which is located in Tempe and is SRP's oldest operating steam plant. Construction on the Kyrene, and then this construction on Kyrene began in 1951.
Yeah, thank you, Alondra. And just to add to what Alondra mentioned, right? SRP is a municipal utility, one of Arizona's largest electric and water utilities, and provides services to more than 2 million customers in the Phoenix metro area. So they actually decide the energy rates, any extra fees on your electricity bill, and how easy it is for you to go solar. Investor-owned utilities like Arizona Public Service, APS, or TEP are regulated by our elected corporation commission to ensure that they act in the public interest and protect ratepayers from bad investments. And so, like Alondra mentioned, unlike investor-owned utilities, SRP is a public utility that's instead overseen by a board of directors. And so if you're a renter in SRP territory, you actually don't have an opportunity to vote. So if you're an SRP customer and you get your electricity from a utility that has no state oversight, and and that we cannot directly influence either. And so despite the fact that their decisions will impact our monthly bills and the air we breathe, we don't really get that direct influence. So it really is an undemocratic process. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit more about ways at the end to get involved in some of these policy decision spaces as well.
All right, so natural gas powered peaker plants. So natural gas powered peaker plants are specific type of natural gas power plant designed to provide electricity during long periods of high demand. So this turns on during the hot summer afternoons when air conditioning is at its peak. So these peaker power plants burn natural gas to generate electricity, releasing pollutants such as nitrogen dioxides and particulate matter into the atmosphere. While they are essential and we can all recognize that we need this part of the energy grid for maintaining reliability, they also have health effects associated with their operation. So fossil gas peakers are some of the dirtiest plants on the grid, and they disproportionately impact low-income communities and communities of color. So in this next slide, we have a map here, and this shows the size of each circle shows the capacity of that generating that power plant and how much the generating capacity is, and the color. So the color indicates the utilization of the plant. So the closer the color is to red, the lower its utilization. So if you see right here, I don't know if you all can see my mouse, but if you see in Arizona, there is this big red circle, which means that one, it has a huge capacity, but two, it is not really being used. And so you all can see some in California and some in the East Coast where they're not being used. They do have some capacity, right? Because the size of the circle indicates the capacity of it, but the color indicates the utilization. So just to give you all an idea of where the peaker plants are and how much are actually being used and how big they are. And now I'm going to pass it along to one of the panelists to go over the next slide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Bowman, and I'm the Regulatory Director in the Interior West for Vote Solar. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the impacts that peaker plants have specifically on surrounding communities. And we have more information on the health impacts coming and more detail. But just to provide a high-level summary of some of the impacts that surrounding communities experience when peaker plants are operating. Since peaker plants are emitting nitrous oxide and particulate matter, which is abbreviated PM, that can result in air pollution that causes respiratory problems, and it can exacerbate existing conditions like asthma. And so it's especially problematic in vulnerable populations where people have other underlying health conditions. And nitrous oxide emissions can also contribute to the formation of ground level ozone, which is itself a lung irritant that can cause respiratory distress and also worsen cardiovascular conditions. And then particulate matter, which sometimes it's called smog, can also get deep into your lungs and enter the bloodstream and can cause health problems, including heart attacks, aggravating asthma, and other respiratory problems. And then, when it comes to water usage, peaker plants, some natural gas peaker plants use water for cooling the plant, and that can have impacts, including removing water that is needed for other purposes, or potentially contaminating water or impacting aquatic ecosystems when contaminated wastewater is disposed and not managed properly. Next slide, please. And then, looking more broadly at some of the impacts, peaker power plants can be very loud, so they can result in significant noise pollution especially for the communities that are right nearby, particularly when they're turning on and they're ramping up to meet high demand periods during the summer very quickly. And prolonged exposure to high noise levels can have impacts like disturbing sleep or causing stress-related health issues and reducing quality of life for people who live nearby. We know that peaker plants are often located in or near low-income and minority communities, and that's true generally and also specifically true in Arizona. And so low-income and minority communities are disproportionately bearing the health burdens and the other burdens associated with emissions from power plants and noise pollution. Beyond the immediate communities, oh, sorry, could you go back? The last slide. Thank you. Beyond the immediate surrounding communities, there's climate change impacts, especially from older peaker plants. And while peaker plants are generally more efficient than some older coal-fired power plants, they still release a substantial amount of carbon dioxide when they burn natural gas, which contributes to climate change and has its own impacts on people and on human health, as well as things like extreme weather and the spread of diseases. There's occupational risks from working at peaker power plants, including high temperatures, noise, exposure to hazardous chemicals, and so adequate safety measures and protective equipment are essential to protect workers' health. And then there are community concerns that go beyond these specific concerns, like concerns about air and water quality, safety, the noise, and the impact of having a big power plant in your backyard or in your community.
So why should you care? So this is important to acknowledge, as Kate had already mentioned, that a lot of communities and people of color are at a close distance and proximity to these peaker plants. So if you all can see in this graph below, we have the percentage and then the number of peaker plants and how many of these plants. So for example, we have 346 peaker plants, and there are 2.9 million of residents that are within that 3-mile radius. And we have people of color 0 to 13%. And then we have the average nitrogen oxide that is emitted, which is 14.6 pounds/MWH. And so you all can see here that 75 to 100% in percentile, in general percent, but percentile of people of color live within around those 150 peaker plants that are a 3-mile radius from that plant. So that is going to be 17.1 million people that live within that radius. And that's really concerning because that's a disproportionate amount of POC people. But again, these communities are exposed to these toxins. And with nitrogen oxide emissions rate, there's a 60% higher than populations with low percentages of people of color. So it's really concerning. And the science is here. And the math is here for you all to see how these communities are being impacted. And now we're going to pass it to our panelist, Vivian. She will be covering and telling us about the health impacts.
Thank you, Alondra. So thank you for this opportunity to present on this webinar. Again, my name is Vivian Huang. I'm a trained physician and medical epidemiologist. I am a steering committee member for the Arizona Healthcare Professionals for Climate Change. And also I'm the chair of our decarbonization work group. Next slide, please. So just briefly, I want to introduce you to our group. So the Arizona Healthcare Professionals for Climate Action is a coalition of Arizona health professionals that recognize that climate change harms health, We aim to educate, empower, and engage health professionals, the public, and policymakers on climate action so that our future will be healthy, sustainable, and equitable. And if you are a healthcare professional that's listening in today, or a student, or you just want to learn a little bit more about us, please scan that QR code, which does take you to our membership form. Next slide, please. So while I was preparing for this talk, I didn't know this, but I learned that today, September 7th, serendipitously, is actually World Clean Air Day. And this is actually commemorated by the United Nations Environmental Program. So a nice coincidence. This is the 4th World Clean Air Day. And then here you'll see two nice infographics that's put out by this group to raise awareness. And on the left-hand side, as someone like myself that's worked for Doctors Without Borders, I can really appreciate this statement here that air pollution knows no borders. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that air pollution is really costly from a financial perspective. So unfortunately, we really are dealing with a health crisis here. So the climate crisis is a health crisis. We know that 7 million people a year are dying from air pollution, and that's more than the people that have died in the entire COVID pandemic over the last 3 years. Next slide, please. So today, given that I have about 10 minutes with you guys, my goal here is really to just provide you with some basic background on the ways that climate change and specifically air pollution can negatively affect human health. So here are some of my learning objectives for today. So one, it's to briefly explain the impact of climate change and how it affects human health. Next, I'll show you the association between air pollutants and health. And then lastly, I'll talk about some various health effects of poor air quality. Next slide, please. So this image here is actually taken from the CDC website, and it shows really how climate change affects human health in various ways. But today I'll focus mainly on air pollution, but you can see that climate change touches on many issues. And for example, here you can see that we are seeing more vector-borne diseases such as malaria, such as West Nile virus, such as dengue, in places that we normally haven't seen before. Next slide, please. So this slide here is actually taken from the American Public Health Association website. And it really shows how climate change and poor air quality leads to impacts on our environment. So with global warming and also poor air quality, we see more intense wildfires. We also see increased pollution with increased greenhouse gas emissions. And because of this global warming, we're also seeing more increased allergens in our environment. And all of these things lead to worsening or aggravating existing cardiovascular, respiratory, and allergy related illnesses. And here in this infographic, so here on this infographic on the right, there's just a few studies that have been done to really look at how poor air quality affects the healthcare system. So in 2003, the California wildfires caused an increase of 5% in hospital visits due to asthma. We also know from another study in New York City that there were 3,600 emergency room visits for asthma in adults, and this is all due to particulate matter exposure. And certainly, I think this past summer, we saw how New York City was affected by the wildfires that were happening in Canada. We also know that with increased particulate matter, there's also a 15% increase in cardiovascular disease mortality risk. And then with climate change, the length of ragweed season has increased. And you'll see that in Minnesota and Minneapolis, this has been increased by 21 days. And also in Fargo, North Dakota, this ragweed season has increased by 19 days. Next slide, please. So I think we already briefly touched upon this just earlier, but this is just a reminder that the power generated from electricity, from heat, from transportation really comes from the burning of fossil fuels, which produces air pollutants, especially ground level ozone and also small particles. And these pollutants are really harmful to our lungs and to our heart and also to many other organ systems. Next slide, please. So we know that greenhouse gases are increasing, and this in turn creates global warming, and this results in extreme weather situations. And we also know that greenhouse gases, it creates floods, it creates droughts, it really changes the air quality and makes it more poor. And what this is doing is increasing diseases across the spectrum. So not only do we see more vector-borne diseases, we're also seeing non-communicable diseases like cancer, heart disease, asthma. We also know this increase in greenhouse gases really are affecting maternal health issues with increases in maternal mortality, increases in stillbirths, and also increased in mental health issues and as well as trauma. Yesterday, I read an article in a major newspaper looking at how heat is really affecting people with schizophrenia. There's a person that was in the Phoenix area that passed away from schizophrenia, and there is a link that people who have schizophrenia have an inability to regulate their body temperature. So the extreme heat and global warming is also affecting people with mental health conditions. Next slide, please. So these are some of the common sources of air pollutants, and the first one is ground ozone. And ground ozone increases in warm weather. It forms when there's exhaust coming from the burning of fossil fuels, when it reacts to heat and light. The other common contributor to air pollutants are particulate matter, and examples of these include emissions from burning fossil fuel, and this comes from the power plants that we're talking about, industrial processes and vehicles, also dust, fire, wildfires, and the particles that are produced from that contribute to particulate matter that harms physical health. And then pollen is also considered particulate matter. Next slide, please. So here, just wanted to show you the different sizes of the particulate matter because it matters when we're talking about how it affects human health. And so on the left here, you can see the sizes as compared to a strand of human hair. So the human hair is about 50 to 70 microns in diameter. And then you can also see that the fine grain of peach sand is about 90 microns in diameter. Now, over here, particulate matter that's between 2.5 and 10 microns. This includes dust, pollen, and mold. And now the ones that we should be concerned about are the smaller particles. More concerned about are the smaller particles that are 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. So you can see how it compares to the human strand of hair. And these include combustion particles, organic compounds, and metals. And then here on the right side of this slide, we already talked a little bit about this, but we know that ground ozone is a respiratory irritant and so directly irritates the lungs. Now, when it comes to small particles, which are less than 2.5 microns in diameter, these small particles can really escape the nasal passage and also the upper airways. And what these small particles can do is actually lodge deeper into your lungs and they penetrate there. And what this does is it produces inflammation, which can be harmful to the lungs and the rest of the body. And we know that these small particles can cause worsening pulmonary issues, can cause worsening heart disease. We know that this increased emergency room visits and also hospitalizations. The other piece of this that is also really concerning is that these particles can really lead to poor lung development in children. Next slide, please. And so this is my last slide. And so just wanted to pull everything together here for you. But we know that from recent studies and the evidence is piling up that air pollution has the potential to really harm almost all organ systems. And you can see that reflected here on this slide. And so when we talk about the brain, we know that air pollution has a strong evidence in causing strokes. When we're talking about the lungs and the pulmonary system, there's really strong evidence that air pollution is associated with lung cancer, pneumonia, asthma, COPD. And unfortunately, we are seeing more and more lung cancers in young people, and these people have never smoked cigarettes. When we look at cardiovascular system, the heart, our air pollution we know is strongly linked to heart attacks, high blood pressure, hardening of the arteries, and also abnormal heart rhythms. So, we've been collecting this data for a while now. And so what we're really seeing is that this strong association of these air pollutants and air pollution, poor air quality is really leading to negative health impacts. So it's really important that we try to decrease air pollution and climate change. We need alternatives to fossil fuels for our energy source. And so I'll stop here and turn it back over to the next speaker to talk about some ways to really, some ways that you can combat climate change and also pollution. Thank you for your attention and time, and I'll stop here.
Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about a clean energy future. Specifically, we'll talk about solar for this slide. So I wanted to just kind of dive into what solar is again, right? Solar produces pollution-free power for your home, business, school, or work. You can power your home with clean, renewable energy from the sun. And unlike other forms of energy generation, solar uses little to no water. It can also be located on rooftops or in your neighborhoods, right, where energy is needed. So rooftop solar is when solar panels and other equipment are physically installed on your property and the electricity generated by your solar panels goes straight into your home. Then you have community solar, which allows individuals and businesses in your community to share the benefit of a solar project. So even if you can't install solar on your roof, community solar projects really are designed via like a subscription model. And so it allows you to pay monthly for the electricity produced by the community solar project. Also, solar, when paired with storage, can keep your lights on during a power outage. So solar provides tangible customer savings. It has no fuel cost volatility. So the price of natural gas, as we've seen in the last few months and year, right, fluctuates and has been really high and has actually more than doubled than what we have seen over a year ago. And so unlike gas, solar has no volatility there. It also is good for reduced respiratory and cardio health issues. So the National Renewable Energy Laboratory discovered that with greater usage of solar, pollution is also drastically reduced. And so this results in lower rates of bronchitis and other respiratory or breathing issues, along with cardiovascular illnesses, and can also help with avoided winter and heat mortalities. Next slide, please. Oh, next. Wait, is this one yours, Kate?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
This one's mine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we can use to power our grid with clean energy. But before talking about the solutions, it's important to understand the role that peaker plants play on the grid, and also to understand one of the fundamental limitations with our electricity grid. And so what we call the grid is a giant network of power plants and transmission lines and the distribution lines and the poles and the wires that actually connect to your house and bring energy to your house, down to the meter on your house. And the grid's sometimes called the world's biggest machine because really all of those parts are connected and they have to operate in a coordinated way. And what that means is that every device on the grid has to be operating in the same frequency all the time. And the way that the whole grid stays at the same frequency everywhere all the time is by ensuring that the energy that's being produced and put onto the grid is exactly equal to the energy that's being used in any given moment. So you can think of it kind of like a conveyor belt that has to move at just the right speed all the time. And so if the amount of energy that's being used by everybody on the grid begins to go up and it starts to outpace the amount of energy that's being provided to the grid, then what utilities have to do is they have to go get more energy. And so that could mean turning on more power plants or turning up a peaker plant, or purchasing it from the market if they don't have any power plants that they can turn up to ramp up to provide that energy. And if the utility can't procure energy from somewhere, then that's where, it's like the conveyor belt moving too fast and it starts to cause problems. And what utilities have to do is to start cutting people's power to make sure that that demand for electricity doesn't outpace the supply that's available. And if it does, it can cause bigger blackouts and more catastrophic problems on the grid. So on the other hand, if you have a day where people aren't using that much energy and utilities then have to turn down power plants and ramp them down, and they sit there idle, and even though everyone has paid for those power plants to be built, they're not being used, and until people start using more energy, they're sitting idle, and they can't be run and they can't be used because it's important to keep that balance of supply and demand in balance with each other all of the time. Next slide. So this is where traditionally utilities have relied on peaker plants to be able to provide that service of monitoring exactly how much energy is being used and then adjusting quickly in real time. So they can turn peaker plants on or turn them up as people get home and you start to use electricity and crank your air conditioning. And they can also be turned down quickly when people go to bed and energy usage starts to decline. So they're more flexible than other types of fossil fuel resources, and that's really where their value is in providing energy to the grid, but also ensuring the reliability of the grid. Storage really represents the next frontier when it comes to providing that flexible energy on demand. And storage presents a solution to this problem of providing energy flexibly exactly when people need it and quickly. And in a lot of ways, storage is actually better than peakers at doing that job. Storage has really fast ramping capabilities and faster ramping capabilities than peakers, which means that it can be turned up or down or on or off really quickly and much more precisely than ramping a power plant up or down. And then storage also has a smaller physical footprint. And so, you can have a couple batteries, you can have a whole shipping container full of batteries, or you can have several shipping containers full of batteries. And so it's really scalable to all sorts of different sizes. So it can be located in urban areas where you can rely on the storage if there is a grid outage for backup power, but it can also be scaled to be located wherever it makes the most sense to install storage. And then storage can provide a faster response. And so that means it's actually, in a lot of cases, better at providing reliability services, just because it is electronic. And so it can be turned up or down or on or off very quickly. Next slide. And then I just wanted to provide the caveat too, that there's actually, when you talk about energy storage, there's a lot of different types of energy storage and a lot of different technologies out there. And the one that you usually hear about when you're talking about the grid or providing power to the grid is the same technology that you use in your home and your life all the time, and that's lithium-ion batteries. So lithium-ion batteries are the most commercially available for storing energy and electricity on the grid. And also right now, they're the most affordable. And utility scale batteries are, really just a scaled up version of what you have in your cell phone or what you'd see in an electric car. So that's usually what we hear about when we hear about utilities and using battery storage. But I did want to call out that there's other technologies out there and they each have their own advantages and disadvantages. So one disadvantage of lithium-ion batteries is that it's typically they're batteries that can only provide energy for a relatively short duration, like maybe 4 or 8 hours at a time. And so there's other technologies that can be used to provide longer duration storage or even seasonal storage. So they can store energy, during the winter, for example, and then release it during the summer. So some of those technologies are flow batteries, and flow batteries are a type of battery that uses an ionized solution and pumps it back and forth between two tanks to create electricity. And they're not as common as lithium-ion batteries, but they're becoming more common. And SRP has actually just announced that they will be installing a flow battery at Copper Crossing. And so, they are out there, and utilities are slowly beginning to make investments in these other technologies. Another whole category of battery technology is gravity storage. And gravity storage is really simply just using energy during times when it's available and maybe you have too much of it and don't need it on the grid to move something uphill or up several, up a tall building. And then when you need the energy from that object, you can drop it and use the resistance from the object to produce electricity. So this picture here there's lots of different ways to do that, but this is my favorite. It's a site in Nevada where a utility is using energy to pump trains uphill at an old mining facility. And then the trains sit there until they're needed, and then they're roll back downhill when the energy is needed and can generate electricity whenever you need it. So there's these all these other ways of storing energy that rely on different types of technology. And then sort of similarly, there's pumped hydro, which is when you use energy to pump water from a river or reservoir up a hill, and you store it in a reservoir that's elevated above where you pumped it from. And you can store it there for, hours, days, weeks, months. And then when you need energy, you can release that water downhill and then use a hydroelectric turbine, just like a regular hydroelectric dam, to generate electricity. But it allows you to manage and store that energy and use it exactly when you need it. So there's lots of technologies out there. There's technologies that are commercially available today and utilities are investing in. There's others that are, a little bit farther out in terms of being applicable, and things that utilities are actually going to be building and investing in, but it's improving really quickly. And so, there are a lot of different and exciting solutions. And then I'll turn it back to Yara to talk a little bit about some incentives that are available to make investments in your own home.
Thank you, Kate. All of that is such great information. I feel like you can never stop learning. There's so many resources and so much technology, right? And I think we're going to continue to see a lot of it in the next few years as well. But yeah, so we're getting to the end of our presentation here, and just wanted to take some time to talk about some of the massive investments that we've seen in clean energy deployment and technologies in the last year, specifically a lot of it coming from the IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is the electrification rebate. There is a rebate that covers heat pumps. So heat pumps are 3 to 5 times more energy efficient than a traditional heating system and works in all types of climates. And so for low-income households which is under 80% of the area median income, the electrification rebates cover up to 100% costs up to $8,000. So that includes an electric and induction stove, a heat pump clothes dryer cost, and your regular heat pump as well. And then there are also a few available tax credits to help electrify your home and your vehicles. And so one of the things that comes up and is on this document, I believe, is battery storage. So a battery storage system lets you store energy from the power grid or from rooftop solar for use in your home. And you can use a home battery to power any electric appliance in your home, even during a grid outage. So the battery storage systems are most effective when paired with rooftop solar, because it really helps enable households to store no-cost solar electricity generated during the day for use around the clock. And so there is an incentive, 25D, that provides households an uncapped 30% tax credit for a battery storage installation. So an average battery storage installation costs about $16,000. With this 30% tax credit, you're looking at around $4,800 that you'd be saving to install a battery in your house. The next thing I wanted to kind of cover really quickly are electrical vehicles. So there is a $7,500 new electrical vehicle tax credit that applies to electric vehicles with a maximum retail price of $55,000. And with vans, SUVs, and pickup trucks with a maximum retail price of $80,000. Actually, starting in 2024, these tax credits are going to be transferable to dealerships, essentially converting them into an upfront discount. So I'm really excited to see that play out in the next year. So this tax credit applies to 30% of the cost of a used. There's also 30% of the cost of a used EV on top of the new EVs. So that's up to $4,000 on a vehicle with a maximum price of $25,000, weighing no more than 14,000 pounds. Right under you have 25D, sorry, there we go, 25D. And so that provides households an uncapped 30% tax credits for rooftop solars. In 2022, an average 6 kilowatt rooftop solar installation cost about $15,000. And so the average tax credit savings will be around $4,600. The actual cost, however, depend on a variety of factors, right? Including the size of your home, the size of your solar panel, system, and location. 25C and 25D tax credits incentivize household electrification by lowering the total cost of qualified electrification upgrades. So 25C provides a capped 30% tax credit for heat pump water heaters, and qualifying electric panel upgrades, select weatherization measures, and it also includes energy audits. Next slide, please. So there's also the Home Efficiency Rebates Program that provides $4.3 billion in formula funding for states to create rebate programs for whole home energy efficiency upgrades. Arizona's formula allocation is $76.9 million. So the Arizona Office of Resiliency is a grantee and administering is a grantee and the administering agency of the program at the state level. Residential energy contractors, workers, trade organizations and associations, and existing program implementers are going to be essential partners in the successful implementation of this program. And you can also see a handy list of all of the energy efficiency rebates, the tax credits that we just discussed. And there's even a calculator that kind of tells you what you qualify for if you visit the rewiringamerica.org website. So I will go ahead and drop that in the chat. It's such a great tool, and would definitely recommend that you all take a look at it. And then lastly, SRP does provide some limited resources to improve energy efficiency in your own home. You can hop onto SRP and kind of poke around their website to see what's available. APS does some of the same as well if you want to hop onto their websites. Depending on who your electric utility provider is, you can visit their websites and find resources around energy efficiency and support that they might offer. And all right, this is our last slide before we hop right into Q&A. Thank you all for sticking with us. We covered a lot of information today. And so before we move on to Q&A, I just wanted to share some opportunities for you all to get involved. So I think this is there's a great opportunity for you all to plug into policy decisions. We discussed the ACC, SRP. I'm going to flag a little bit about the ACC and other opportunities to work with, for example, the Governor's Office of Resiliency. And so some of the things that come to mind when thinking about how to get involved is, first and foremost, the sign-on letter that we've created. We are actually asking SRP to move faster towards their 100% renewable energy goals. And so we would appreciate your support with signing on. I will also go ahead and drop that petition in the chat. I will do that now. And so we're also just encouraging you all to contact your local elected officials and to be in contact with them, right? I'm sure you hear this a lot, but at the end of the day, utilities want to be friendly and liked by representatives. And so our elected officials hold utilities accountable, and they need to hear directly from you, from their constituents, so that they understand what it is that the community want and need. Also, if you live in SRP territory, we encourage you to register to vote in the SRP elections coming up in the spring. I believe it's in April. I will drop a link on how to register. Like we mentioned, the process is a little complex and just tedious. You have to be a landowner in SRP territory in order to vote, and you get a vote based on acreage. But I think that it's still really, really important to elect board members who are going to be clean energy champions and who are really going to help advance the deployment of clean energy technologies while prioritizing BIPOC and historically marginalized communities. And last but not least, I mentioned the ACC right at the beginning of this slide, right? So if you're not familiar, the ACC, or the Arizona Corporation Commission, is the governing body that regulates electric utilities and is supposed to protect public interest. So 3 out of the 5 seats are up for re-election next November in 2024. If you're registered to vote in the state, then you will automatically see this race on your ballot. But if you're not registered, I would definitely encourage you all to go on to the DMV or MVD website and register to vote, so that we can ensure that we're electing clean energy champions at the Arizona Corporation Commission. As of now, we only have 1 lone Democrat and 4 Republican commissioners. And so really think it's important that people are out there and aware that this election is happening in the next year and plugging in where possible to ensure that we are electing candidates that also really want to see rapid deployment of clean energy technologies, center community and equity, and just really champion clean energy initiatives. Thank you. So yeah, we will go ahead and open it to Q&A. We have a few minutes left, and I know that that was a lot of information. So thank you all so much for bearing with us. You can feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, or go ahead and drop them in the chat. This is also recorded, and it's going to be shared on our YouTube, on our social media, and will be sent to everyone who registered to attend likely tomorrow. So everyone will have access to this presentation and to our emails if anyone has any additional questions as well.
There's a question in the chat. Will the slide deck be shared with the attendees?
Yes, it will be shared tomorrow. Yes, of course. Thank you all for joining us. All right. I don't see any additional questions or any hands up, but am I missing anyone? All right, well, we can go ahead and leave it at that then. If questions do come up, please feel free to send us an email or follow back up, and we are happy to answer that. And we're always looking forward to continuing the conversation and finding ways to get to work with you all. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.
Bye.
Bye.